Welcome, guys. We've got Paul and Greg. We're going to talk about the Gramsci, the Hinterland album, which I have a copy of right here. Thank you for dropping that off. And it's all very exciting. So, Paul, you're in Auckland, right?
Yep.
And where are you, Greg?
I'm at Roundhead Studios in Auckland.
I can almost see you from here then.
Yes, so I'm pretty close to you, really.
All right, very
close,
good.
Close, but socially distanced.
Oh, of course, always. Well, yeah, this is
really
great. So let's get started by just talking about how the two of you worked together when you were making the Hinterlands record.
Greg.
Take it away, Greg. You can start.
Well, kind of Paul sends me songs.
Yep.
And lots of them. And like for the Hinterlands, it was interesting. He sent me what was essentially the songs from the album, and then a whole lot of other songs. And then the conversation was, which album shall we record?
Right.
And it's classic Paul McLaney, or way too much material, a million ideas. And I guess part of my role has become to filter those ideas down into a workable system.
Right.
I guess our brains work in different ways. So,
right.
But really, I'd become so kind of enthralled by the concept of the Hinterlands, and probably as well, that initial kind of draw card was, I loved that Welsh TV series Hinterland. And I love that kind of like that sort of cold West Walian, sort of like mysterious, a little bit kind of screwed up society kind of vibe. So I was kind of drawn to that idea of the concept behind it. So my answer to Paul was, let's record the Hinterlands and then we'll do something else later. So, but we had and then it was a question of discussing what the record should be. And we were very much along the line of like, we were looking at sort of, Peter Gabriel, Talk, Japan, a lot of those 80s quite artistic groups. So we were kind of imbued what we were trying to do rhythmically and sonically with the record. Also, The Cure, and
right.
It was a lot of a surprising amount of 80s influence for that record, really.
Does that sound right to you, Paul?
Well, the 80s is a big thing, isn't it? 80s can be Peru and go west, so there's
yeah, exactly.
Quite a big thing. I know that Troy had that conversation with Greg too, but I wonder 80s recording. Well, what do you mean? Is it talking, or is it?
Yeah, it's 10 years. It's 10 years of, and the 10 years I remember musically really well. That was very much my musical upbringing. So to describe the 80s, I think a lot of young producers think of the 80s as some gate reverb on a snare. And and we know that isn't the case. It's much more subtle and much broader than that. So I think that like Paul said, I just produced Troy Kingi's new album, which is very much an 80s record.
Right.
And it's not about those little things. It's about a really broad picture and about how the technology limited what we were able to do. And the records were made because of those limitations, not because of, I think people think it's the other way around, but we were really limited by the technology. So we had to kind of be super creative with what we had. And whereas this record with Paul was very much as a band would record in the 80s, like a band like Japan would record, where it was live instrumentation. We all got in a room and we played together. So in that way, they were very different records.
But for me, there's with the lyrical content, it's about starkness, about clean, precise lines. In my mind, it's almost like a marriage between something like 17 Seconds by The Cure and Avalon.
Right.
But that era, if there was one particular era of the 80s, and I think those bands that Greg mentioned are the ones that they were really trying to push the sonic envelope. Like when you listen to Over Spring by Talk, you're as impressed by the sound of it coming through your speakers as you are as the songwriting and the musicianship and the performance.
Yep.
And this, that sort of around about 1982 and stuff too. There was that sort of, I don't know if it was the shift in recording technology was like that, it was the heyday of tape, I suppose. And, there's something like In the Air Tonight, there's a real starkness to that. So when those drums do explode, that's why they explode, because they're in contrast to what's come before it.
Yep.
And a similar thing with 17 Seconds, it's so clean, that's a band playing in a room together. And I'm the geek that reads the Sound on Sound articles about how Mike Hedges recorded it and stuff.
Right.
But you've got Lol Tolhurst trying to be an 808, because they're inspired by krautrock and all this stuff, and I think their big inspiration was David Bowie's Low.
Right.
which again is a very stark record, as opposed to, something a bit more glam rock or,
Yep.
from
Yep.
the music is always in service to the lyric, so that emotionally we're trying to talk about this very stark quality. And Greg mentioned it, and when you think of the hinterlands, you don't think of like, palm trees and beaches. You think of, this,
Yep.
interior. Yeah.
Flat and
So
sparse.
that musical aesthetic really is in complete service to that emotional space, and it's not a homage to the 80s, but it's taken a lot of inspiration from things like Intruder by Peter Gabriel, or as
Right.
I say, certain aspects of Roxy, certain aspects of Talk Talk and the Cure, and then Japan, Rain Tree
Yep.
Crawl.
Well, it's interesting. I mean, let's face it, technology has always driven music and vice versa. Even back in the 40s and 50s when they're inventing microphones and moving from carton to tape and various. So now we were just talking earlier about the forensics record and the production that was capable on that, with pretty much Eddie Rayner doing all of it in his living room. So, I mean, the things that you can do these days are quite impressive. So how does technology affect what we hear on the Gramsci album?
Well,
I mean, the interest. Oh, go on, Paul.
No, I was going to say, first off, you got Greg playing the drums. You can't do that in Eddie Rayner's living room. I'll tell you that.
Okay, I bet you can't.
I could try. I don't think Eddie and his family would be too happy about it, but yeah. I mean, what was interesting. I get the two main differences. If we did it in the 80s, we'd have spent 18 months doing it, and we'd have agonized a lot over it. By doing it now, we did it all in 6 days, and we didn't agonize. It was the budgets compared to what we used to have to record in the 80s are just chalk and cheese, really.
Yep.
So it was all, but I don't think we were quite expecting it to be such a quick process, really, because we were going to go in, we were going to do quite a lot of rehearsals, myself, Paul, and Marika Hodgson, and we were going to really work through the songs. And then in the end, we were all locked down. So we had 1 day of pre-production the day before the studio. So, but I think that was actually helpful because we didn't overthink the songs. We learnt the songs from Paul's demos, and we went in and we played them in the rehearsal. It's like, all right, this sounds good. Let's go in tomorrow and we will start recording. And 6 days later, we had a finished album. So it was really probably the quickest record that I've made for a long time, if ever, really. And it was, and I think that immediacy, although it sounds precise, it was really, it was always fresh. We were never bored with it. We were always excited by the next thing that was going to go on.
Right.
And helped by the fact that Paul did all his vocals in one evening, all the lead vocals in one evening.
Yeah,
that must have been tough. I mean,
I've been sitting there listening to Greg play the drums for days, and then Marika's, and basically I played the guitar solidly for 2 days. So by the time it got to Friday, or Sunday night, I can't remember what it was, I'd just been chomping at the bit because I had such a vision for how I wanted what my emotional engagement with these songs is. That singing them was almost just something I had to get through, and I was just chomping at the bit to do it. And I came in at 8 o'clock and said, "Hey, Greg, I think I'm going to sing the record tonight." And he was like, "Oh, you might do one."
Surprise.
Yeah.
Excellent.
I mean, what was really interesting in when we were playing the songs as a band, and Paul was doing guide vocals when we started tracking, because we were playing quite loud as a band, he would really forcefully deliver the song. Yet when he came to do the vocals, it was a much more introverted, quiet, sparse performance. And I wasn't quite expecting that. I thought by us playing the songs, he would naturally just push everything out like he did when we were doing the guide tracks. But it really, when he started doing it, it was like, all right, I get it now. I get what the juxtaposition is between what we're trying to do musically and what he's trying to do vocally. And I think, and because the vocals were quite soft and very, very sort of like forward, he was able to, it'd be hard for a singer to sing a whole album in an evening, but I think because of that delivery, it made it possible. And really, 4 hours later, all the lead vocals were done. And it was an amazing feeling walking out after the end of, what I thought was going to be the first of maybe 3 or 4 sessions.
Right.
And thinking, apart from a few overdubs, we've got this in the can already, and it was
pretty cool. Yeah.
I was, and it wasn't planned. It was, I mean, and it saved a ton of money, which is always a good thing.
That's always good. Now, speaking of time, my understanding is that you, Paul, look at this as kind of a culmination of 20 years of work, kind of leading up to this record. So what does that mean to you?
Well, I've got basically three monikers for how I release music: my name, Gramsci, and Impending Adorations.
Yeah.
And I parked Gramsci back in 2005 and went off on first the acoustic thing and then the electronic thing. With the acoustic stuff, it's generally, well, with the Paul McLaney stuff, it's generally acoustic, and it's generally captured live. It's pianos and strings, and it's like a black and white photograph, like a blue note photograph, like a jazz session or whatever. Impending Adorations actively tries to stay away from traditional instrumentation. It's meant to be like the music of the mind, and it's very inspired by things like Burial and stuff like where it's chopped up found sound and music concrete. And it's an exploration of where you can go outside of the traditional, parameters of a band playing in a room. And then Gramsci is like, if Paul McLaney's photography, then Gramsci is oil paintings. It's the sound of musical ambition, and it's the cauldron of everything, really. And by examining the parameters or the periphery of all my musical sort of, and all the theatre stuff that I've done as well has been a huge part of it too, writing for theatre and for dance.
Right. Yeah.
It's finally me coming to terms with who I actually am as a musician. And fundamentally, I'm a guitar player who sings. I think, it's always been presented that I'm a singer who plays a guitar, but right. I would say at the core of it, I spent the first 10 years of my musical life being Johnny Marr or Jimmy Page looking for Morrissey or Robert Plant. And then at some point, nobody wanted to do it. So I started singing. and then that set me down that path. But, I'm really, really, really fascinated at the moment, and I have been for a few years now, about the emotional palette of what electric guitar can do. For me, it's the most expressive instrument. Next to the drums, there are not many instruments we could give the same guitar, say, to Martin Knopfler or Jimmy Page or Jeff Beck or Dave Gilmour, and you'd know instantly who was playing it just by listening.
Yep.
There are a few drummers on the planet, Bonham being the obvious one. As soon as there's only one person that could be.
Yeah.
But that lexicon of musical expression that's beyond, verbal eloquence, within the Pink Floyd thing, I would say Roger Waters tells you how he's feeling and Dave Gilmour just shows you.
Right. That's good. Yeah, I like that.
And on this record, the songs like Ourselves, the first track, which is about self-loathing or fear or things like that.
Yep.
About this, not being proud or not being completely in control. And then those guitar solos are like, fuck you, this is who I am. Comes at you like a tsunami of just like, this is me, this is what I do. And it's coming full circle back around to that young kid who was listening to 17 Seconds at the 16 and going, what the hell is this? This music's amazing. Or hearing the Completely Numb guitar solo for the first time and tears streaming down your face. It's just owning who it is. I've gone off and I've looked over here and I've looked over here and I've looked over here and I've looked over here, and I've come back and this is what I've learned. And it all comes back through the original love affair, which is the guitar.
Yeah. Okay. Very good. Now you mentioned Ourselves. So there's a couple of tracks I wanted to talk about, that being one of them, but another one is Legend, which obviously seems to have some topical content with it about fake news and conspiracy theories and all that. And we're all having to deal with that in our own special ways, reading newspapers and who we know that are involved in that. So tell me what your thoughts are and why you wrote that song.
She don't feel what tomorrow might bring, because yesterday already brought you a lesson to be learned about the shape of things. History already taught it.
really about owning your own truth, I suppose. You know, this whole fake news phenomenon, it's just another blip on a very long. I remember doing when I first lectured at university, and it was something it was something about jurisprudence. It was quite mind blowing, and you're going, oh, this is too much. And the guy said at the end of it, if you compressed all of human history into 24 hours, how long do you think humans have been here? And he said, I'll give you a clue that the dinosaurs were extinct at 30 seconds to midnight. It's like we've been here for a second.
Yeah. And
there's that lyric in that song, here beneath the altered skies, all the energies of heaven. We are the energies of heaven. There's a book called that I'm quite fascinated by, called The Phenomenon of Man, by a guy called Teilhard de Chardin, who was a Jesuit priest, but he was also a Nobel Prize winning botanist. And in that book, he tries to prove God through science.
Right.
And for me, I'm not a religious person at all. And it sounds pretentious to say it out loud, but anyone who knows me would probably back me up that music is my religion.
Sure.
Like, I'm like a liner notes sort of disciple. And I think the thing about that is that it's about, music is fundamentally about communion. It's about the distant touch, the distant embrace. It's about empathy, because, music without empathy is noise. And that's, and what I'm unashamedly big picture in this Gramsci music, it's cinematic, it's unashamedly big.
Yep. It's big. Yep.
Music I want to lose. It's a world I want to go into and inhabit. And those were the records that, made a difference to me when I was growing up. And you want to hear somebody saying something that you're thinking back to you, maybe articulate a thought or present an emotion musically that creates empathy.
All right.
I mean, it's been really interesting looking at musicians like Paul and myself, and I was also thinking of Victoria Kelly and her Requiem piece.
Right.
It's really interesting to see musicians who have been in the industry for a long time and have also worked within the industry structure, looking at themselves and going, why did I become a musician in the first place? Did I become a musician to enable other musicians? Which is great, but do I do that whilst neglecting my own musical creativity? And it's really interesting to see musicians who've been involved in lots of areas of the music industry to go back into becoming musicians again. And I've been really, for a long time, I'd love to be in a band again. It's not something I've done for like 20, 30 years, because I've always been helping other musicians either make their records or in various ways in the industry. And it's really great to sort of have a musician to work with someone like Paul. So when Paul came to me and said, would you want to be in Gramsci? I'm like, of course, I'd love to do that, because I can be a musician again. It's why I got it in the first place. And I think as you get older, you worry less about what other people think about the music you make. And it really frees you up to be, I don't care if this song's 13 minutes long. I don't care if there's 3 guitar solos in it.
Yep.
I'm doing it. I want to do it because that's what I want to do musically. And there is something very freeing about being an older musician in the music industry. And it's really refreshing to see and see other musicians who think the same as that.
Cool. So now, when the three of you, along with Marika, what kind of, do you talk about what you're going to do with this record and what these songs are before you go in, or is it a kind of more of a musical communication?
Greg and I definitely talk a lot about reference points and things like that. My invitation and Greg's invitation to Marika was because she's so phenomenal.
Right.
Like she was, what shall I do? And we're like, we want you to be you. The same way that you ask Pino Palladino to be Pino Palladino, you don't, hey, Pino, can you do some sort of Jacko stuff for me?
Yeah, right. That would go over well.
Marika, it's like, she said, well, what do you want to do? I said, I want people to listen and go, oh, that's Marika Hodgson. She's awesome. Yeah. And there's so many, but there's a line on a track called The Beginning where she plays across the bar towards the end, and it's just this magical, and these things are just coming out of it. And that's, I think, one of the benefits of us not maybe overworking the songs and rehearsals, that we're capturing these things as they're happening, and that always has a very particular excitement.
So do you have these musicians in mind when you're writing the songs? Are you thinking this is something that will work well with Marika or Greg or whoever? Are you thinking about how they're going to be played?
We've mentioned certain bass players, and Greg brought Marika in, and Marika and I have a very long history because we're both grew up in Whangarei and
Right.
family connections and stuff too. And I've known her since she's always been amazing. She was amazing when she was 13. But
Yeah.
I like Greg.
I mean, what was interesting that thinking back in it was that was the first time me and Marika had worked together as a rhythm section. I'd played percussion with her on Troy Kingi shows,
right?
And I'd really like realized what a great musician she was, and so when because there was no bass guitar on Inheritance, the previous record, and I just felt that it needed, that Mick Kahn kind of like sort of like Pinot thing going on. And it's like, well, first he's got the technical ability, obviously Marika, but then when we get in, like Paul said, when we get in the studio, I think she was quite surprised when we were like, you do you, that's what we want. What we don't want sort of anything else. So, but I was quite surprised how well we gelled as a rhythm section, because we literally that day, the first time we'd ever played together as bass and drums was the day before, in that rehearsal, the day before the recording. So and we worked together on a few records since, and it's she always surprises that. And it's often in retrospect where you're sitting in the studio, you're listening back to something she did a few days previously, and you're like, that's really quite a work of genius. How does she think of this? And she'd be the first person to kind of like put down her own playing. So it's really quite, I think she doesn't realize how impressive she is as a musician.
Right.
Scott Seabright, the engineer on the record, when she was tracking a bass, because we could see the grid. And she's always like 8 milliseconds before or something, or after. I can't remember what it is. Probably after.
Just behind. Yeah.
And he said, I don't really understand it. Like, it shouldn't work. He said, but if she doesn't open her eyes, I know there's nothing to worry about.
It's become known as the Marika feel. I've spoken to Joel Mulholland about it, and I've spoken to a few other producers about it. It's like, how does she do that? It's like she has this unique feel that's hers. That does, if you look at it, this is why you shouldn't look at music. It's why you shouldn't be looking at a Pro Tools screen when you're recording. You should be listening to it. Right. It always sounds perfect until, and it's like, and it isn't perfect, but that's why it sounds so good. And it's, it's kind of, it's remarkable. That's the beauty of musicians playing in a room. That's why I always still gravitate towards an ensemble of musicians, because it's that collective that brings the real magic to it, that you never can quite capture when it's just you and a Pro Tools rig or a Logic rig and a load of plugins. And it's it's just, I mean, that's my opinion. Other producers would disagree with that, but I really feel that that the Smiths would not be the Smiths without those members, and the Cure would not be the Cure without those certain smaller relationships within the group. And so I think it's always that unexpected that makes records magical.
For me, it was the that first rehearsal, that only rehearsal. You hear those, whether apocryphal or not, but it's stories about the first jam that Led Zeppelin had, and they were started playing and they're just looking around the room going, what the hell is this? For me, to play guitar solos over a rhythm section like Marika and Greg, Greg hits those drums. That's why I said Eddie probably wouldn't want it in his lounge, but it's like this juggernaut. It's like you're riding in this sort of juggernaut. It's like and so just hold on, and if you want to really let rip and start wailing on a guitar, and you've got that behind you propelling you along, it's a pretty exciting thing. And so it really inspires you to play as good as you can, obviously we'd play everything in the studio and go back and overdub things. And doing one of the solos on Watershed, and Marika walked in with a partner, and it was just about to go, this is the bit I'm about to start playing. She just sat down next to me, and I was like, now I've got to be really, really, really good.
I love it. So I know the things are up in the air with live shows and all that. What are you thinking about doing now the record's out?
Well, we've had to postpone. We had a release gig and then a power station gig, but we've parked those because it's until there's actually some certainty around the rug not disappearing out from beneath. Because we want to do something like we did last time at the ASB Waterfront Theatre.
Yeah, that was beautiful.
A lot more ambitious. It's not music to be played in a pub in the corner while the rugby's on. That's 300 empty bottles of beer into a bin during the ballad. You know, it's I'm very much for moving music out of you know, contemporary popular music is sort of ghettoized into bars and clubs, you know, and a lot of people, that's not really where they want to, you know.
Yep.
You don't go and see contemporary dance in a pub, and you don't go and see, you know, theatre that much.
Yeah.
But you know, so there's a very ambitious live show attached to it all, an evolution of the inherent shows. But for the next wee while, I really want to focus on. Yeah, this is a record I want to keep in play for a good long while. You know, as I say, this. Normally, what would be happening now with the record out last Friday, I would be like halfway through, if not three-quarters, if not completely the whole way through writing the next album. That just hasn't happened this time.
Okay.
Like, and that's why I recognize it for what it is. Like, you know, it's this culmination, and I want to keep this in play, and so that, you know, moving the gigs further into the back at the end of the year doesn't bother me, because in the first instance, it gives me a chance to continue working with Richard Bell, the director, on more visual content in terms of you know, we are working on a short film that will accompany the album in much the same way, I suppose, something like Anima did for Tom York, but something longer form, but more segues, and, you know, and some narration and something that can contextualize the music in terms of that hinterland shared metaphor of, you know, a landscape.
Yep.
So I think, you know, and that's a better use of my mind, or my engagement, because, you know, I think one of the unspoken issues that's going on in the whole COVID thing is that when you cancel a gig, or you have to move a gig or postpone a gig, it's not just about moving the date. There's a whole bunch of things around just herding cats. If you're in a band with Marika and Greg, chances are that there's about 3 days that year that they can play with you.
Yep.
You know? And Joel Mulholland, my God, that's like probably 2 days. But for me, it's the, you know, my heart went out to Reb Fountain when she had to, you know, cancel her Civic and the majority of that tour. And it wasn't, I'm pretty sure, and I'm speaking on Reb's behalf here, but the thought isn't, oh no, how am I going to pay for that? It's like the incomplete artistry. And it's that effective. What that does to your well-being and your momentum as an artist, you know, because the thing about being a recording artist or any sort of artist is this momentum of your craft, you know, and for that to be interrupted and the timeline just, you know, just backwards and forwards, you know, it's very hard to maintain that through motion, you know, that have that wake behind you. And I'm really conscious of maintaining that for myself within the Hinterlands project, because I know by the time we get on stage, you know, I've been in a room with these guys playing music with them, and I know what it feels like, and I know how it's going to land. You know, and Marika has been the missing piece of the puzzle, really. And with those four musicians on stage engaged in the sort of visual presentation that we want to give without any compromise, will be worth the wait.
Cool. So, Greg, you're in Roundhead. What are you working on? Anything exciting?
It's an artist for an album for a Swiss artist called Caroline Chauvin, who did a record for a few years ago, and so she's in Switzerland and we're here.
Right.
So it's so this is recording during COVID. There's been a few records I've made. I mean, we finished the Troy Kingy record with Troy in Northland, Scott in South Auckland, and me in Titirangi, and it's you know, we've just figured out ways to make this work. And so there's lots of kind of early morning, late night phone calls. There's lots of audio feeds going around. So I'm working on that this week. And then first, I got the first trip back to Europe at the end of March. I'm going to Norway to record a band from the Czech Republic for a few weeks, COVID permitting. But at the moment, it seems like it's going to happen. And then, so we're sort of, you know, since I came here to retire, I ended up doing quite a lot of records. And joining bands, and I guess musicians never give up. You just keep going till you can't go anymore. So I guess, you know, the idea of doing some shows with Paul and with the Hinterlands material is really exciting. So it's you know, I don't get a chance to play drums at gigs very often, and it's nice to bust out the big Ludwig kit and make some noise, you know. So that's really exciting to do that later in the year. So I'm pretty pumped about that.
Well, I mean, we've been treated to amazing music, especially New Zealand artists who are dealing with, they have time, and you guys are a perfect example. Now we just got to worry about saving all the venues, and like you mentioned, the power station and tuning fork and all these places that are closed down. So hopefully you'll be able to go out there and get the folks out, because everybody seems to be kind of very wary of getting together
I'm kind of optimistic, because obviously I've been in touch throughout the last few years with British musicians and my friends there, and you know, I see how quick the turnaround was once Omicron took hold. There's definitely been, you know, most venues are starting to open up again now, and the theaters are opening, and you're only looking at sort of like December, January, and we're in February, and everything's getting back to not normal, but at least able to do shows, able to play gigs. So I feel pretty optimistic that this might be shorter than we all think it will be. I'm not an epidemiologist. I don't know this for a fact, but just looking at, you know, all my friends in Europe and seeing how quick the timeline's been, and how things are starting to work again, and musicians are starting to work. So, you know, fingers crossed, you know, by the time we get into winter, we'll be able to have, you know, a lot of decent shows. And there's a lot of musicians like chomping at the bit,
I'm sure,
with albums coming out that really want to go out and, you know, making great records, wanting to get out there and do some shows.
Yep. Of course, everybody was saying we'll wait till 2022 and we'll all be back, and here we are, and we're still sitting around.
I mean, I feel like the Hinterlands is a winter album anyway. So
there you go. Might as well. It may very well be. Well, whether we see you in the summer, fall, autumn, winter, or spring, doesn't really matter. We urge people to get the record, throw it on the turntable, and crank it up. So thank you for making it for us. And
thank you, Marty.
Thank you for talking to me.
Thank you, Marty, and thank you for all the work you do for bands. It's really appreciated. It's you know, we sort of you know, we watch your, you know, listen to your shows and avidly, and it's so we really appreciate the work.
Well, thank you very much. Yeah, and maybe I'll see you across the street at the cafe or something.
Awesome. Let's do that.
All right. Have a great day.
Marty. Cheers, Paul.
Bye.
See you guys soon. Bye.